Let's talk about James Bond. Are you up for getting that role? Because there's a number of people after it. Will you be the next 007?
Oh, you'd be a great
Consider
one.
that question while I move on to another one. The British Film Institute has today put trigger warnings on all the James Bond films. Don't laugh, it's very serious. Because it says, please note, many of these films contain language, images, or other content that reflect views prevalent in its time but will cause offence today. They will not cause offence today. What on earth do you think you're doing? As I said this morning, if I had a licence to kill, I'd be down a BFI right now. What do you think about it? It's ludicrous, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, I'm tempted to say the name's James Price.
Yeah,
and this is great. You go back and watch some of these early Bond films, and they are, to put it delicately, very of their time. But that makes them interesting and useful as historical documents, interesting to see how the character has developed, all these sorts of things. Right? He's meant to be a bit of an anti-hero. The whole shaken, not stirred is because he likes the drink to be more coarse, even, right? There's those sorts of thuggish elements to Bond if you go back to the original books. There are some pretty unpleasant bits in that as well. But this idea that people watching a movie about a bloke who goes around killing people needing to be warned that there might be a bit of violence, this is the kind of infantilization that's emboldening Iran and China.
He seduces women. That's terrible. It's terrible. I mean, honestly, to the BFI, to all the people who put trigger warnings on things like Jane Austen books, we're grown-ups. We don't need this.
What I would say, actually, is that the James Bond films, in many respects, gave some women some pretty kick-butt roles. I mean, it was one of... Growing up, I used to love You Only Live Twice. That was my absolute favourite. You know, the one in Japan where the volcano opens up? Oh, it's so good! And the big rocket eats the little rocket at the beginning. It was all Cold War era. And there's a fabulous scene in there, which you couldn't really make today, where he's having to turn himself into a Japanese man to get a new wife because his first one's been poisoned. And he goes down some weird spa and they wax his chest and then they put these, like, eyelids on him to try and give him sort of Far Eastern eyes. It's mad.
But this goes to the point about racism and things like that. If you start telling people you've got to be offended by that, isn't it terrible? This guy that every British man secretly wants to be James Bond, he's actually the worst thing in the world and terrible. Yeah. People start catastrophizing this. Yes. It's not just harmless. It makes people weaker. It makes them more fragile. And actually exposing people to these sorts of things in the gentle way of watching a Bond film prepares you for the difficulties of real life as well.
And let me say something else. The James Bond films are a triumph of British culture. This is what we gave the world after all these years. This is like 70 years or so. They're still going strong. This is from us. And the BFI says these titles are included here for historical, cultural and aesthetic reason. And these views are in no way endorsed by the British film industry or its partners. In other words, the British film industry appears to be ashamed of one of the British film industry's greatest products.
No,
pathetic.
It's enough to make a cat laugh at this point, right? James Bond is a symbol of Britain at its best, going out there, being brave, saving the world, taking on the baddies and taking the consequences of his actions. And that's what we should be doing in a much broader scale as well.
Yeah, they should have a look at some Nollywood films and see how they measure up when it comes to political correctness. We will